6:30, July 12th. It's time for the Finance Committee meeting with myself, Nick Allen, Bernie Flynn, and Brian McGinnis. We'll call the meeting to order. Item number 2 is comments, suggestions, petitions by residents in attendance regarding items not on the agenda. I have one thing for this. We're going to go ahead and try to amend 4A, which is to approve our purchase for a brush truck to add the chassis and upfitting, which we just got the numbers for yesterday evening. Are there any issues with that?
No.
Okay, great. Thank you. Any other items not on the agenda this evening? Excellent. We will move on to item 3A, which is our 2022 draft financials presented by Dale Umbenhauer, CPA at Malley.
How's that? Is that better? There we go. All right. All right. I'm going to start on page 3. I'm going to go through the financial statements. I'm going to point out some of the important items in the financial statements. That there's 76 pages, so I'm not going to go through every item in the financial statements. So on page 3, this is our opinion. I'm going to point out the second paragraph there, and that's the actual opinion. And what that says is that in our opinion, the accompanying financial statements present fairly in all material respects the financial position of the borough as of December 31st, 2022. The rest of the opinion goes into the basis for our opinions. And then we have an emphasis of matter. So we have 2 emphasis of matters for the current year. The first one is that we restated the opening net position with regard to the due to, due froms, which council had taken some action on prior to the audit being done. The other emphasis of matter is that we adopted GASB number 87 for the current year. And what that is it's related to leases. And what that says is that any lease that the borough enters into as a lessee has to be valued at the present value of all the lease payments and a liability put onto the balance sheet. Consequently, any leases that the borough acts as the lessor also has to get put on the balance sheet. The lessor items go on the governmental funds. The lessee items only go on the governmental wide. Are there any questions on that? On the second page, this just goes into our responsibilities for the audit of the financial statements. And then the third page of the opinion is just required information regarding the prior year comparative information, the RSI, and the SI. The next section is the management discussion and analysis. And you'll see at the top of the page that says it's unaudited. The only thing we do with that is we verify that the numbers presented in there agree to the numbers that we're auditing that I'm going to present going forward. So that goes over to page 14, and that's where I'm going to start now. This is the statement of net position for the government wide. And what this is it shows the assets, liabilities, and net position for the entire borough. So we have that broken out by governmental activities, which is the fund level statements, and then the business type activities, which is the proprietary funds. So on the governmental activities, we had total assets of $41,087,302. We had some deferred outflows of resources related to refunding, OPEB, and pensions of $9,468,975, giving us total assets and deferred outflows of resources of $50,556,277. That's offset by total liabilities of $31,996,550 and deferred inflows of resources of $1,593,36. That leaves us with net position of $16,969,391 on the government wide. On the business type activities, we have total assets of $34,884,740 and total deferred outflows of resources of $532,424 for a total of $35,417,164. Our total liabilities are $13,960,631. The deferred inflows of resources are $666,032, leaving us net position for the business type activities of $20,790,501. Over on the next page, this is the statement of activities. The way this reads is left to right. and then top to bottom. So we start with our expenses on the left and the government-wide expenses, 23,071,578. Those expenses were offset by charges for services of 6,383,914, operating grants and contributions of 1,392,182, and capital grants and contributions of 122,850. That left us with net expense of 15,172,632. So that's the amount that's left over after all the expenses are paid that needs to be made up by the general revenues that are presented. Our total general revenues and transfers for the year were 16,324,891. That gave us a positive change in net position for the year of 1,152,259. The business type activities, we had total expenses of 6,951,594. Those were offset by charges for services of 10,885,314 and some operating grants and contributions of 20,136. We also had some general revenues there. Transfers out of $2.7 million gave us a general revenues of negative 2,646,350. Add that all together and it gives us a positive change in net position for the year of 1,307,506. Yep.
The under culture and recreation, why is those numbers so high? For expenses, 917,000.
917,018. So the thing to remember with the statement of activities and the government wide is that's where all the expenses go for the items that are on the government wide balance sheet that aren't real. They're more like paper liabilities. So the changes in the OPEB, the changes in the pension, all that stuff flows through this statement of activities. So the liability, we went from a net pension asset in the prior year of 2,353,652. The current year that flipped to a liability of $12,860,098. So that's a $15 million swing. And then the deferred outflows and inflows also swung in different directions depending on the assumption changes and stuff like that. All those expenses flow through to the statement of net position. So that's why it's showing up as higher than it normally would. When I get to the statement of changes in fund balance, that's where you'll see that it kind of settles back down. Over on page 16, this is the balance sheet for the governmental funds. And this is, we start with the general fund. We had total assets of 5,690,646, total liabilities of 3,241,847, some deferred inflows of resources of 380,496, leaves us with total fund balance of $2,068,303. The capital operating reserve fund, we had total assets of $8,429,568, all of which is assigned for capital reserves. The stormwater fund had total assets of $1,774,589, total liabilities of $1,478,524, giving us restricted fund balance of $296,065. The debt service fund had total assets of $421,539. 109,875 of that was restricted, and 311,664 of that was assigned for debt service. The non-major governmental funds had total assets of 484,917, total liabilities of 482,852, and some deferred inflows of resources of 30,934, leaving us with net position restricted of 144,684, assigned of 22,810, and unassigned of a negative 196,363. The next page is the reconciliation, and that just gets us from the from the net position of the governmental funds to the fund balance of the governmental funds, which we just looked at. Over on the next page, this is the basically the income statement for the governmental funds. So for the general fund, we had total revenues of $19,307,030. We had total expenditures of $19,278,457. And we had some transfers in and transfers out, a net of $1,797,630, giving us a net change in fund balance of $1,826,203. And if you see there, the culture and recreation line item is $623,653. The capital operating reserve fund, the only revenues we had there was actually an investment loss of $376,812. The expenditures, we had general government of $14,112, leaving us a deficiency of revenues over expenditures of $390,924. That was made up by a net transfer in of $500,000, leaving us a net change in fund balance of $109,076 for the year. Stormwater fund had program revenue of $1,361,208, expenditures of $551,663, and net transfers of $51,222, leaving us a net change in fund balance for the year of $860,767. The debt service fund had interest and rents of $1,659, all of which flowed through to the fund balance. The non-major governmental funds had total revenues of $1,332,984, total expenditures of $2,346,653, and then net transfers in of $419,484, giving us a change for the year of negative $594,185. The next schedule is a reconciliation that takes us from the schedule we just looked at to the government-wide. I mean, you'll see the things in here that are on there that I discussed earlier. So we have the changes in the compensated absences, the OPEB, the pensions, and the interest. Over on page 20, these are the proprietary funds. So this is the business type activities. This is broken down between the sewer fund and the parking fund. The sewer fund had total assets of $11,978,724, total deferred outflows of resources of $293,991, for a total of $12,272,715. The liabilities associated with that were $714,291, and we had some deferred inflows related to pensions of $23,193. That gives us a total net position of $11,535,231, of which $2,407,020 is unrestricted. The parking fund had total assets of $22,906,016, deferred outflows of resources related to refunding and pensions of $238,433, leaving us a total of $23,144,449. The total liabilities for the year were $13,246,340. Deferred inflows of resources were $642,839, leaving us net position of $9,255,270, of which $2,593,895 was unrestricted. The next page is the statement of changes in the fund net position for the proprietary funds. We had total revenues in the sewer fund of $5,868,700, operating expenses of $4,203,340, giving us operating income of $1,665,360. We had transfers out of $1 million, leaving us a change in net position for the year of a positive $685,578. The parking fund, total operating revenues of $5,028,439, operating expenses of $2,327,375, some non-operating expenses of $310,800, and then transfers out of $1,768,336 gave us a positive change in net position for the year of $621,928. The next two pages are the statement of cash flows. This just shows the ins and outs of cash through the year. I'm not going to go over those. So I'm going to go over to page 24 now. And this is the statement of fiduciary net position. So this is the pension trust funds. We had total assets for the year of $61,278,613. And you'll see how that compares to the prior year balance there of $73,874,978. We had total liabilities of $38,505, leaving us net position restricted for pensions of $61,240,108. The next page is the statement of changes in the fiduciary net position. We had total contributions of $3,034,571. We had investment income, a loss of $12,482,879. We had deductions of $3,179,169, giving us a change in net position for the year of a negative $12,627,477, all of which is directly a result of the net depreciation in the fair value of investments. I'm going to flip over now to page 35. This is the deposits and investment footnote. I'm going to point out the investments tables here. So on the governmental funds, we had fair value investments of $7,818,076. You'll see those are broken down here between Treasury notes, Ginnie Mae, and Fannie Mae. The fiduciary funds have $57,388,456 in investments, and those are pretty much broken down between mutual funds and exchange traded funds. Over on page 37, this is a new footnote for the current year, and this is the lease receivable. So earlier I mentioned that we adopted GASB 87 in the current year. We didn't have any leases that qualified for recognition as a lessee, but we did have some that we need to qualify as a lessor. And this here presents the 3 leases that we have, and then the amount for each one. So our total amount, the future lease receivables, is $645,104. That's broken down between principal and interest. And the $64,346 is the current amount due in 2023. Over on page 39, this is the capital assets footnote. In the current year, we had $1,186,221 of additions, and that was offset by $2.3 million of depreciation. Over on page 42, this is the long-term liabilities. So this shows all the long-term liabilities that the borough has, including the bonds, notes, the compensated absences, the pension, and the OPEB. So for the governmental activities, we had total long-term liabilities of $28,313,634, of which $660,196 is due with the coming year. The business type activities, we had total liabilities of $13,582,150, of which $529,041 is due within the coming year. Over to page 46. This is the footnote that shows the debt maturities for the long-term liabilities. So this shows the debt maturities for the next 5 years and then in 5-year increments after that. Our governmental activities have total principal due of $9,245,302. And the business type activities have total principal due of $12,746,98 for a total of $21,986,000. Over on page 51, this is the police pension plan. I'm just going to point out here the changes in the net pension liability for the year. As you can see, we started the year with an asset of $1,933,118. We added in our service costs and interest, and then we factored in our contributions and our investment losses with the benefit payments, and that takes us from an asset of $1,933,118 to a liability of $7,861,527. Over on page 56, the same information for the non-uniform plan. We started the year with an asset of $420,534. We ended the year with a liability of $4,998,571. Again, a direct result of the investment losses. Over on page 60, this is the OPEB plan. So what OPEB is other post-employment benefits. And what that really is it pays for your officers to have health insurance from the time they retire until they reach Medicare age or they find another job. There's also some minimal benefits in there for your non-police employees, which is a life insurance policy of $1,000. So basically the liability is for the benefits that are provided to the police after retirement. We started the year with a liability of $5,735,003. We ended the year with a liability of $5,814,837. That's an $84,334 increase. The way the borough structures their OPEB plan is pay as you go. So the borough just pays the payments as they come due. And that's what most municipalities in your situation do. I think of all the municipalities that Maley does, we only have a handful that actually set up a trust fund for the OPEB and are setting money aside for it. Over on page 63, this is the prior period adjustment. We had a lot of information to present here with regards to the restatement for the due to, due from analysis that was done. So we figured the best way to do that would be to put it in table form and show what the previous balances were, the restatement, and then the current year balance after that. And then the bottom two paragraphs there are talking about the implementation of GASB 87. And what we had to do was we had to implement that at the beginning of the period because it has to be applied retrospectively. So we implemented January 1st, 2022. And we did that by adjusting the beginning balance of the lease receivables and the deferred inflows of resources from $0 to $710,380. Over on page 64, this is the budgetary comparison schedule for the general fund. We budgeted total revenues of $18,106,571. The actual amounts came in at $19,307,030, with a positive budget variance of $1,200,459. The total expenditures, we budgeted $20,252,210. The actual amounts were $19,278,457. Again, a positive budget variance of $973,753. We budgeted for other financing sources and uses of $2,145,639. They came in at $1,797,630, which is an unfavorable variance of $348,009. For the year, we had a positive budget variance of $1,826,203. The next page is the same information for the stormwater fund. So we budgeted total revenues of $1,165,135. They came in at $1,361,208, $196,073 over budget. The expenditures were budgeted at $952,534. The actual was $551,663, a positive budget variance of $400,871. We budgeted for some transfers out of $212,601. Those actually came as a transfer in of $51,222, giving us a positive change in budget of $263,823. That left us with a positive budget variance for the year of $860,767. Over on the next schedule, this is the changes in the net police pension plan liability and related ratios. I just wanted to point out again the difference between 2022 and 2021. When you look at the net pension liability at the bottom there, we have a liability of $7861527 versus an asset of $1933,118 in the prior year. Over on page 68, here I just want to point out the change in the weighted return of investments. So for 2022, our rate of return was a negative 15.53%. And you can see that that correlates with the positive changes in the 3 years before that. Over on page 69, this is the same information for the liability for the non-uniform plan. Again, I just wanted to point out that in the 2022, we have a liability of $4,998,571 versus an asset in the prior year of $425,34. On page 71, again, the information regarding the investment returns. So for 2022, we had an investment loss of 16.83% as compared to the previous 3 years of investment gains. On page 72, this is the changes in the borough's total OPEB plan liability. So you can see we have information for the last 5 fiscal years. Our total ending liability this year is the $5,814,837. And you can see that actually decreased by $26,458 from the liability in 2018. So your liability has been kind of staying steady. It's not way off the board like a lot of them are, because the borough of Westchester kind of has a better control on the coverage that's provided and the people that are covered under the plan. That was all I had to present. If there's any questions, I'm happy to try to answer those.
Dale, the only question I have for you after all those numbers is that the pension lost $12 million. How does that affect our MMO, or is it for the years coming up? Do we get a credit because we lost money? That we don't have to pay the minimum municipal obligation. How does that work out?
Right. So what'll happen is whenever the actuary does their calculations and they see that huge swing, okay, we don't want to flush that huge swing through in the current years. So it's put in the deferred inflows and outflows and amortized. Okay. So it'll probably be amortized in there like 7 to 10 years. That being said, when you get your MMO is likely going to be higher because you need to make up some of that loss in the amortization, right? Next year, if the investments go back up, that will affect your MMO in a positive way, right? So everything depends on the performance of the market. And 2022 was a lousy year, but the previous few years before that were pretty good.
The question is also I used to tease the previous asset manager, PMA. We had to if I remember, we have to guarantee as a borough a certain percentage to the pension. Our Mendoza line was right around 7%. How's that stacking up with what we're looking at with the 2022 being and 2021 not being so good?
Well, I mean, that number, the 7% number that you're referring to, that's a number that is built up over many years.
Okay.
So they're probably using a history of maybe 10 to 20 years to determine that amount. When you compare it to your returns, because the 7% is actually what they're selecting as your return on investment, right? To determine all the
They
liabilities.
said that we had to guarantee them at least 7%
Right.
return on their investment.
So the way that works then is when you have years where the investment return is way more than that, then that goes again into the deferred outflows, and similar flip when it's not a good year. Yeah.
Mr. McGinnis, any questions?
No, none.
I just had one about our trust fund, or we don't have a trust fund, you said. Can you
For
explain
OPEB.
the mechanics of that and like what the differences are between?
Yeah,
having-
so it's similar to the pension. So let's just say we have a pension and we're going to set up a trust fund for the pension. That means that the borough takes, let's just say $1 million and puts it in that pension plan. Okay, that's in trust now. The borough can't take that back for any reason. That belongs to the pension plan. Similar situation for the OPEB. So right now we have a $5.8 million liability for the OPEB. So if the borough were to set up a trust fund for that OPEB and put that $1 million in there, right, that liability would now be $4.8 million, right? But OPEB being what it is, and because it's just a paper liability, I mean, the liability is based on if every employee that the borough had that's covered by the plan would retire tomorrow or leave tomorrow, and the borough would be on the hook for all that money, right? We all know that's not going to happen.
Okay, thank you. And I'm assuming, does that just make budgeting easier every
What's
year?
that?
Does the trust fund idea just make budgeting more consistent, or like, I'm having a hard time. Sorry, the trust fund, does that make budgeting like more consistent every year? Like what's the reason to do it?
The reason to do
And-
it is to just set money aside.
Okay,
That's the only reason to do it, is to set money aside to pay those liabilities when they come due. So right now, the borough paid, I think, $320,000 out this year in benefit payments. So if the borough were to set up a trust fund and set money aside, that 300 whatever thousand would be paid out of that,
okay,
not out of the borough's general fund.
okay, great, thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that's it for me. I really appreciate that. Any other questions from the public or? Okay, great, thanks so much.
Right.
Really appreciate it.
I betcha.
Ready, we're good to move on to our June 2023 financials.
Hi, good evening. Starting with page 1 of the report, the June 2023 cash balances. We started the month with $20,192,088 in cash. We brought in $4,773,822. We spent $4,718,748. This left us with an ending cash balance of $20,247,162. Of this amount, $2,918,242 is for general fund operations. $467,780 is restricted EIT. $1,572,800 is for ARPA. $2,266,417 is for sewer operations. $2,137,564 is for parking operations, and the remaining $10,884,359 is restricted cash. Moving over to page 2, the budget to actual summary by department for the year ended June 30th. We booked actual revenues of $22,622,758. This is offset by actual expense of $16,401,439, leaving a net income across all funds of $6,221,319. Of this amount, $2,416,844 is attributable to the general fund, $785,393 to the sewer fund, and $613,816 to the parking fund. Moving over to the rest of the report, the fund balance summary. As of June 30th, we would expect all budget line items to have about 50% remaining. Looking at pages 3 and 4 for the administration department, EIT and real estate taxes are still performing very well. However, we are starting to see a less than favorable trend in the lien taxes and the deed transfer line items. Liened real estate taxes has 76% of the budget remaining, and deed transfer is at 68%. On the expense side, we have a few line items that are overspent at this point in time. One of them being the Berkheimer tax collecting line item. That is overspent by $3,500 or 116%. The biggest thing being paid out of that line item was $3,500 paid to Portnoy to fund the 76 letters that went out for unpaid real estate taxes. The software line item expenses is also over budget by 65%. We have some reclassifications within this line item to take items that were booked for the Brightly and Cardiograph ARPA spending that needs to go into the capital line item expense. Overall, the department is operating at 43% left in their budget for expenses. Moving over to pages 5 and 6 for the police department. Overtime is meeting expectations at this point in time, and in June, we made a transfer of $366,411 to the police pension fund to pay down the 2023 MMO. At this point in time, we have $918,894 left on the police pension MMO balance. Moving over to the housing department in pages 7 and 8. Looking at their revenue, they are at 66% at this point in time. There was a position budgeted within the department for a fire inspection that was supposed to bring in $60,000 in revenue. However, that position is not filled. So on the flip side, while the revenue is not coming in, we're also not spending it on the expense side under salaries. Overall, the department has 56% of their expense line item remaining at June 30th. Moving over to the IT department on page 9, we'll see that the website expense is overspent by 74% or $8,877. We do have a reclass within that line item for the WatchKeep invoice that was booked. This was booked to the wrong line item. It should have went to the support line item instead of this. So that will put that line item back $9,800. Moving over to Public Works, pages 10 and 11. The recycling line expense has about 14% left through the end of the year. The biggest thing being in this line item is that $8,000 of 22 expenses were paid out in 2023. Overtime is operating within expectations, and overall, the fund has 50% remaining in expenses. Moving over to the recreation department on pages 12 and 13, the department has 72% of their expenses remaining at this point in time. We do expect to see more invoices come through as events pick up in the summer. Moving over to the fire fund on page 14, revenues have 18%, so we have about 2 more townships that we're waiting on collections for. On the expense side, utilities are overspent by $18,000, as well as the equipment repair line item is overspent by 2% or $1,800. Do you have a question?
The line items you're waiting from the other municipalities, are they within terms?
Yes, they are. They had through June 30th, and we record our books on a cash basis, so I expect to see those relatively soon.
Okay.
Overall, the department has 71% of their expenses remaining at this time. We do have to pay out in the next month or so the allocation, the second quarter allocation to the fire companies, and I am working with the chief on that to get him that information.
Can interject just something here that plugs into what we're working on, the group of three here, me, Barb, and Steve, is one of the things that seems to be over budget the last couple years in the fire fund is equipment repairs. We think a better number in that line item is somewhere between $140,000 and $160,000 per year. That's where we're probably going to end up by the end of this year to perform all the scheduled maintenance and the things that come up. So thanks, Steve, for all of that information. I think we'll get a better number that we'll be able to take back to the partner townships on that one.
Moving over to the sewer fund on pages 15 and 16, monthly sewer billing, outside hauling, and certification fees are all meeting expectations at this point in time. We are seeing lagging in the CCH Sardomore and the tap-in fees. CCH Sardomore has about 79% remaining within their revenue line item, and the tap-in fees has 91%. We do expect to receive the $75,000 grant that was budgeted in the sewer fund. That was for a sewer relining project from last year. On the expense side, overtime is overspent by 17% or $3,300. We do have some overspenditures in service contracts and generator maintenance. In the service contract line item, the biggest item being booked to this line is for the Next Gen contract that was approved 2 months ago. That contract covers 4 different facilities within the borough, and the wastewater being one of them. And in the generator maintenance line item, we had about $4,500 in 22 invoices that were paid in 2023. Overall, the department is at 56% of their expenses remaining. Moving over to the parking fund on pages 17 and 18, revenue within all categories is performing within budgeted expectations. We did make the budgeted $100,000 transfer to the non-uniform plan in June. And we also made the $150,000 budgeted transfer within the wastewater fund to the non-uniform plan. So at this point in time, the non-union MMO is at $412,416. Moving over to page 19, the liquid fuels, we received $13,000 in our annual allocation. That was more than what we had budgeted. The fund has 92% remaining within their expenses, and we do expect that to go down significantly once the paving project is paid for. And then finally, moving over to the stream protection fund on page 20, we paid out $54.25 in expenses this month, and overall, the department has 82% of their expenses remaining. Are there any questions?
The only 2 questions I have. Do you have a slide on expenses of lawyers year to date and also engineering?
So the engineering line item would be under the Public Works Department. Just give me a minute to get that page.
There you go, right behind you.
Yeah. So the budget was $30,000. Year to date, we're at $20,189. That leaves us a budget remaining of $9,800, and there's 33% left. So that would be at the top of page 10.
Is that consultants?
Yeah. That's under 014211 consultants. That's just for consultants. So any of the engineering things that we pay. Now I will give you the legal amount. So legal is booked in two different places. We have legal expenses being paid out of the general fund as well as the parking fund.
Excuse me for a second. Under consultants there, we budgeted 30. We actually spent 20, right? So
Yes.
So,
So we have a little under $10,000 left.
yeah, so that's not good finishing up 6 more months.
We're going to be over on that line item.
Yeah,
For
yeah.
sure, but keep in mind too, we are using that money to develop concept plans that can, for our grant applications.
So we're paying the engineers to write the grants?
We're paying the engineers to give us the details that we can put in grant applications. We're doing a lot of the grant writing ourselves, and RVE is doing some of the grant writing as well.
Okay.
So I think it's money we have to spend to be able to ante up, so to speak, for the grants.
Right.
So we could break this down for you with
Well,
more
I'm just
details.
curious,
with the
if we
invoice.
only have, we've already spent 20, and we have basically 10 left. By 10,000 roughly. So how many new grants are coming down the pipeline? Would you say from July now until June? I mean, December. So we would either slow down the grant writing or just exceed budget and keep paying the engineers to do the grants.
What I would propose, and Will can tell you what's coming down the pike. I know we're going to be over on this line item, and we can predict pretty well how much over we're going to be. And the way I manage overages on expenditures is sometimes individual items go over, and I think there's a requirement that be reported to council when that happens, that we manage by departments to the bottom line, meaning the bottom line expenditure in public works is 2.1 million for non-payroll related expenditures. All told, it's $5.1 million. So can we gain some of that money back in other areas by withholding expenditures? Are we performing well in other areas? In my opinion, it's okay to go over in one line item if you're doing well in the other 45. But don't go over in one line item and go over in 5 or 6 more and go over really bad in one of them and then have a departmental bottom line exceedance of budget. I want to avoid that as much as possible.
I agree with you. Yeah, but my biggest fear is that the engineers are doing all the grant writing because we're spent $20,000 to do the grant writing instead of doing it in-house. Okay. All right. Thank you, Will.
Yeah, maybe I'll chime in here. You can't write a competitive grant without an engineer for a number of reasons. Most of the time, a stamped probable opinion of cost from an engineer is required as an attachment. So right there, you need a concept plan. You need to price out materials, labor, all of that. That right there is at least $1,500. Thus far this year, we've submitted 9 grants totaling $3,074,542. We'll submit another $2.5 million this month, and then things really cool off. So yeah, we do have expenses related to grant writing from consultants that are hitting this line item. That is not all grant writing expense. But yeah, we probably spend on average about $1,500 in engineering to submit a grant. And I would say that depending on the application, they're doing between 10 and 35% of the work of any given application, with the staff doing the rest.
So we're doing well with the legal line item. If you go to under the general fund on page 4, you will see there's 2 line items. You have legal fees, which is the normal general administrative things. Year to date, we've paid $43,148 on a budget of $140,000. And then the next line below that, 0140430, is the employment attorneys. That budget was $40,000, and year to date, we spent $22,791.
I like that line item.
And then we also have legal fees budgeted within the parking fund. So if you go over to page 17, the legal line item is 0940430. We had a budget of $25,000. Year to date, we spent $21,352. So that leaves us with about $3,600 left year to date.
Thank you.
Mr. McGinnis, any questions?
No, thank you.
I think, just double checking here. I wrote some things down. None of them were questions. Cool. Thank you. I appreciate it. Any public comment or questions before we move on? Okay, seeing none, we're going to move on to 3C, which is to discuss the American Rescue Plan funding review.
So we wanted to provide a second quarter update. At this point in time, we have had Borough Council has appropriated $2,096,434 for 31 projects that you can see on this sheet in front of you. Year to date, we have spent $526,933. This leaves us with an ending balance of $1,572,800. And of those 31 projects, 22 are still in process at this point in time. Just to reiterate, I think we all know by now the ARPA guidelines. We do have until the end of 2024 to appropriate and 2026 to spend everything.
Any questions on that?
Barb, Mr. Metric, the line item, and I have a brain fog at this point, where we stood with it, the police car upfitting, $110,000. Is that still in there except for the upfitting of the cars?
Yeah, I think we have spent about 40K of that
Yeah. okay.
because that's the upfitting cost.
Right.
And the
right.
rest was folded into the leasing. So
Okay.
that is going to yield $70,000 back return that we can allocate for other projects. So that's why it's important that we complete as many of these as we can. So that when we come back to budget season, we know what's available to allocate.
Thank you.
Barb, what's our
Yes.
estimate that's going to be left out of the rescue funds?
I think if I had to guess at this point in time, we would probably have about 50,000, possibly 50 to 100 maybe, based on some of these projects that we had in place but haven't come to fruition, and we do see some savings on some of them. There is one thing I would like to point out, just to be fully transparent. The last item for the roof, we are spending $637,951 in ARPA funding, but the contract was approved for $728,000. That difference is being made up by 2016 bond proceeds. I just wanted to make sure that that was on the record.
Thank you.
Great, thanks. Any public comments, questions, concerns? Okay, excellent. Awesome, we're good then to move on to our action items. And our first one is to approve a purchase for the fire department brush truck, and this includes the chassis and upfitting.
Good evening, Steve Pelna, Fire Chief. So this is to replace our brush truck currently housed at First Westchester. This is actually a couple-year process to get to this point. We had hoped to bring this to council a year ago, but unfortunately with the supply chain issues, we were locked out of every manufacturer out there. So we did find a spot with Chioka here in Westchester for a Chevy chassis 2024. At this point, we would get a build spot Mr. Metric was able to produce a letter of intent to Chioka. It didn't lock us in, but it at least gave us a spot or a place in line. So it bought us a little time to get this approved. If we do approve it, then a PO is, all right? There goes another chair. That comes out of my budget. Yeah, right. The once we get a PO for the chassis, it goes to Chioka. Then we get a VIN number. Then we get a build spot. Once we have a build spot, it's unknown when we'll actually be in line. The hope is that we could potentially get this by the end of the year, but most likely it would go into 2024 before we would see that. So we're seeing this across the board with the vendors as we went through this process. Again, it's been a tiresome process over a year or two to try to get this, but luckily we are told we have a spot. So the hope is, again, with the PO, that we would indeed get that. So we're looking at just under 50,000 for the chassis itself. And then hot off the presses that I gave to you today through 10/8 was the full build out associated with that. So that is all the lighting inside the consoles for the mounting of the radios. Because this is an off-road vehicle, it's designed for fires, off-road, woods, fields, and also in a lot of our coverage area, we do have residential homes that you have to transverse a low weight bridge that our larger apparatus will not get over. So this gives us the opportunity to transverse those areas. And then also because we're working off-road, more aggressive tires, suspension, winches, because we find ourselves where we get ourselves stuck when we're off-road, depending upon where it is, but we need to be prepared for that. So all in, we're at 103,000, our budget in the 5-year contract. We're on a 20-year replacement cycle for this. The truck currently that it's replacing is a 2003. So again, the hope is that we would see delivery towards the end of the year. The second part, the upfit, we don't want to lock in with that until we take delivery. The problem is if we lock into that today, 6 months from now, not only could the prices go up, but we lose all of our warranties. So the warranties, at least on all the lighting packages and radios, everything else, it's very finite. So we want to push that out as far as possible until we actually take delivery or know when the truck is coming before we pull the trigger on those items. So again, 103 is the total ask for these the chassis. What I'm looking for as soon as possible is the PO for the chassis, so we can get that VIN number and get locked in. Because again, as volatile as the manufacturing industry is right now, it's important we get that as soon as possible. And then as far as the upfit, we won't pull the trigger on that until we actually know when the truck is coming.
Great, thank you. No problem.
No question.
Yep, sounds good to me.
Do I get to name the
Yeah,
truck?
Barb, if you want to.
I just want to say for the record, this money's coming out of the fire fund. It was budgeted for $105,000. And again, that comes from the surrounding municipalities. So
Great, thank you for that. For the record, I do appreciate it.
And on the driver's door, we'll get Bernie just under the
Rush
window.
button.
So yeah, there you go.
Oh, man. Any public comment on that one? Alrighty, we'll call that one a 3-0. And we can move on to item 4B, which is to approve a purchase for upfitting for Public Works dump truck.
So this is for the upfitting of the dump truck that was approved a few months ago. We approved an $86,000 purchase to Fred Beans for a Public Works dump truck. That money was paid out of the ARPA funding. At that point in time, we didn't have the upfitting cost. Tonight we do, so we're asking for approval for this total purchase of a little over $11,000. 11,921.
I'm assuming this is, are the rest of these in budget as well?
Yeah, these were all budgeted, but to be in compliance with the new rules that we're putting for the purchasing policy, this item is being purchased through CoStars, but wasn't awarded by Borough Council. So I wanted to make sure that we had the approval to move forward with this.
Sounds good.
Fine.
Any questions?
No questions. No.
Any public
Thank you.
comments, concerns? Okay, great. 4C is to approve a motion to authorize the borough manager to execute electric and gas purchasing agreements.
All right, so if you'll recall, in December, we went through this process. We had a contract expiring, and things have changed a lot in the third-party energy supply market since 2019 was the last time we did a contract. So just to remind everyone, this is that little supply line item. It's really important for any organization to participate in these markets, as you'll see on the next slide. Go ahead, Jeff. So this is a look at 2022. This is gas prices flowing out of Henry Hub in Texas. This is the best indicator of what's going on with electricity prices because most electricity is generated with natural gas. You know, the timing, everyone want to call it like post-pandemic supply chain issues, but this is all really about what's going on in Europe. You can see what happened when Russia invaded, and then what happened was we started exporting a bunch of gas to Western Europe because Russia weaponized their pipelines, shutting off the tap there, and that was going great. That was really crushing supply, or I'm sorry, putting a huge push on demand, and then this huge facility in Texas blew up. That's why the price dropped. Anyway, I'm showing you this to just show how volatile things have become. What that means for us is we can no longer get a contract, publish it last Friday, talk about it tonight, vote on it next week, sign it the day after the meeting, and have that price be honored unless the price shifted in a way that would be disadvantageous to what they're seeing next Thursday. So the way we worked around this in December was we said to council, we want to sign a contract. The timing is good. We can lock in some savings. We want to be above board on this. And they ask, is that borough council authorize the borough manager to sign a contract that's advantageous? So Jeff, go to the next slide. In December, I recommended a short-term contract. That was 100% the right call because pricing has fallen a little bit more and we can lock in some more money. These highlighted boxes here are what we would pay to PECO if we were out of contract, if we don't do this. On electric, 9.6 cents per kilowatt hour. We can lock in about 6 cents today for upcoming years. I'm recommending a 2 or 3 year contract that we lock in. That saves us about $175,000 per year on electric. Most of that goes to the wastewater plants because they use 80% of our electricity. On the gas, we could only realize about $2,000 or $3,000 per year savings, but it's $2,000 or $3,000 to spend on something else.
A quick question with that. Would we be locking in that contract with PECO or would we be looking at another
Yeah,
supplier?
good question. So what we do once we have authorization from council to make sure we're shopping around is we go to 3 or 4 suppliers. We get pricing the same day and go with the lowest bidder for whatever contract term we're looking at. And again, I'm recommending 2 or 3 years. And I've been responsible for energy procurement for an organization for almost 15 years now. So I'm not coming at this without any professional expertise.
What happens if something catastrophe happens?
Mhm.
Can they pull a force majeure on us and just change the pricing?
I don't think so. I've never heard of that in 15 years of doing this type of
Yeah,
work.
we've done it in the paint industry when we couldn't get supplies. Things blow up in Texas all the time,
Oh, yeah.
and we couldn't get the latex additive to make latex paint.
Mhm.
So, we had to charge everybody almost 3 times the amount.
Yeah.
Force majeure.
I mean, worst case, if that happens, and I can check on the contractual language, worst case, that happens and you're back paying what you would have paid if you didn't do it in the first place. So, and then you can scramble and sign a new contract.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions?
No, I think this is a good thing to do.
Yeah, thanks for your work on this. I really appreciate that a lot. So we'll recommend that 3-0. Item 4D is to schedule a hearing for firefighter real estate tax credit. Are there any time recommendations for that? I mean,
Maybe
it could be
August
quick.
16,
When? August?
August 16.
Sure. Sounds good
works.
to me. 4E is to approve a grant resolution for DCED Multimodal Transportation Fund for the High Street streetscape improvements.
Sure. So set the table on this one. PennDOT's coming in, spending a bunch of money on South High Street, very much focused on pedestrian safety. What they're not doing is anything really outside the curb line. And we had a bunch of conversation about this with council last year. It's going to be a real shame to rip up that street and not improve the aesthetics down there, which are very poor. So this is our marching orders from council after those conversations was go find a grant that could pay for it. That grant is this DCED multimodal for streetscape improvements. What we're looking to do, and this is a phase 1 project. And there's actually, I was alerted to an issue on this resolution this morning by our engineer. We're taking a multi-phase approach to this. Our goal of phase 1 is to go from Minor Street, which we're doing with our own project, down to basically the Burger King. And then the Burger King is going to take care of that block on the one side. But that gets us through the town center district, the southern end of the town center district. So basically extending that aesthetic on Market Street, High Street, Church Street has a couple nice sections all the way down to the Burger King. That's granite curb, brick sidewalk, the ornamental lighting, something else. Tree wells. Yeah, tree wells and street trees. So this is a grant. It's a zero match grant. And the actual price the grant request is going to be $1,479,620. So you can disregard the 2.9 million. That would be the entire.
What about from Burger King on down? What, if anything, is the plan to do?
Yeah.
That?
So that would be second phase. The size of the phases is dictated by how much we can go get a zero match grant for it. And I think it's okay to share. We had a meeting with Westchester University today, a very preliminary conversation about getting them on board at a minimum, providing some letters of support for our grant applications, but maybe getting involved, chipping in. They had
Good luck with that.
Yeah, they had some other interesting ideas. But yeah, the goal would be to eventually tackle the whole corridor and then move on to the next part of Westchester. But we have to, again, phase the project based on the grants that are available.
Any concerns about this?
No, I'm all for it.
Any other questions?
We'll
Yeah.
post an amended attachment for next week.
Sure, great. I appreciate that. Yeah, we can call that one 3-0 as well. And then we're down to our minutes. Any issues with that?
No.
Alrighty, we'll call that 3-0. Any other business tonight?
Nope.
Alrighty, seeing none, we'll go ahead and adjourn at 7:34. Thank you.